Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the following scenario. In a single day, you lose your home, your livelihood, your children, your health, and even the support of the person you love most. Now tell me, would your faith endure? This is not just any story. It is a direct challenge to what you believe. Because if there's one thing we all face, sooner or later, it's pain. And when she arrives, she doesn't knock on the door. She breaks it down. The truth is that no one is prepared to see everything fall apart. But there is one man who faced this absolute collapse and chose not to abandon God. Job is more than a biblical character. He is the mirror of the human soul in despair, but also living proof that hope can weather even the most violent storms. With each loss, he confronts us with a question that few have the courage to ask. What if God remains silent? Will you still follow him? Along this journey, you will not only learn the story of Job, you will see yourself in it. You will understand why suffering, however unfair it may seem, can be the stage for the deepest wisdom, the rarest patience, and the purest faith. And maybe, just maybe, it will change you forever. If you've ever felt pain, doubt, or thought about giving up, this is your story, and the answer you're looking for may be exactly where it hurts most. Job was a different man. In the land of Uz, he was known not only for his immense wealth, but for something far more valuable, his integrity. While many were lost in the pride of possessions, he kept his feet on the ground and his eyes on God. Every morning, even without knowing what the day would bring, Job offered sacrifices in the name of his children, fearing that, perhaps, they had sinned in silence. This care reveals not only his faith, but a deep humility, rare even among the most pious. Even surrounded by comfort, Job did not allow success to distance him from divine dependence. This says a lot about the kind of wisdom he possessed. He understood that material blessing was not an automatic sign of eternal approval. Therefore, he did not trust in his riches, but in the character of God. In times like ours, when so many measure value by numbers, Job teaches us that true greatness lies in cultivating a clear conscience before the Creator. The fascinating thing is that Job wasn't perfect. He was human, like any of us. But his perseverance in doing good, his constant devotion, and his patience reveal a heart trained by faith. Job's integrity did not come from the absence of faults, but from a daily decision to walk righteously, even when no one was looking. This in itself is a challenge for anyone living in an appearance-driven world. And it's worth saying, integrity is not built on stage, but behind the scenes. While most people only act right when they are being observed, Job acted justly, even when no one else was watching. And this detail changes everything, because God sees, and he is not impressed by what is exposed, but by what is secret. Job's story begins with prosperity, yes, but what really caught God's attention was the faithfulness he demonstrated before the suffering began. The scene now shifts from the fields of Uz to something much higher, a heavenly reunion. Among the children of God, Satan appears, the adversary, the one who lives to accuse. And God, knowing Job's upright heart, mentions him with pride. "Have you seen my servant Job?" It seems strange, doesn't it? God, the Almighty, drawing attention to a simple man. But this shows how much faith lived in silence can resonate in the heavens. Satan, cunning as always, does not accept this testimony without question. He casts a poisonous doubt. Does Job fear God for nothing? The accusation is clear. He is saying that Job's faith is self-serving, that his devotion only exists because everything is going well. It's the enemy's old game, distorting intentions, raising suspicions, attacking integrity. And here, bluntly, God accepts the challenge. Allow Satan to touch everything Job owns but spare his life. It is the beginning of an ordeal that goes beyond human logic. Now think about this. God trusted Job's faith so much that he allowed it to be tested. This baffles us because we like to think that faith protects us from pain. But here we learn something shocking. Sometimes faith puts us directly on the battlefield, not because God has abandoned us, but because he trusts us to resist. Job didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, but his life became the stage for a cosmic battle over integrity, divine justice, and perseverance. This part of the story makes us face a harsh truth. Not all suffering comes as punishment. Sometimes it's the opposite. It comes because we are worthy of being tested. Job was chosen not because he was weak, but because his faith was strong enough to face Satan face to face without even knowing it. And that changes everything. It's not about understanding the reason for the pain. It's about trusting that, even in pain, God remains in control. What happens next is heartbreaking. In a matter of hours, Job receives 4 devastating news. Their oxen and donkeys are taken by marauders, their servants murdered, their sheep consumed by fire, and their camels stolen by invaders. But the worst was yet to come. A strong wind destroys the house where his children were gathered, killing them all. It's a cruel sequence, where each blow seems deeper than the last. Just imagine losing everything, including your children, in a single day. How do you react to something like this? Job's first response is neither revolt nor accusation. He tears his clothes, shaves his head, gestures of deep mourning, but prostrates himself in worship. That's right, worship. And then he releases one of the most impactful phrases in the entire Bible. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. This declaration is not passive resignation. It is an act of radical faith, which recognizes God as sovereign, even in the face of chaos. It is important to understand that Job was not numb to pain. He felt it, he cried, he screamed inside. But his reaction shows the power of faith when everything else is stripped away. This scene teaches us that, even in the face of loss, we can choose a response that does not destroy our soul. It's not pretending that everything is fine. It's deciding to trust, even when everything seems unfair. This is the essence of perseverance, standing tall, even with your heart in pieces. The story from Job so far is a powerful reminder. Circumstances don't define one's faith. Choices in the face of loss do. In times where many rebel against God for much less, Job shows us that there is a way to suffer with dignity, with humility, and even with hope. Because sometimes pain reveals who we really are. And Job, even devastated, remained intact. I continued to believe, and that was just the beginning. If the emotional pain was already unbearable, what comes next seems inhumane. Satan returns to the presence of God and once again is challenged. Do you still maintain your integrity, even though you incite me against him for no reason? Satan then proposes something even more cruel, touching Job's health. And God, who continues to trust in the strength of his servant, allows it. Soon after, Job is covered in painful wounds from head to toe. Scratching himself with shards of pottery, he sits in the ashes, immersed in pain and loneliness. And then comes the blow that many did not expect. His own wife approaches and says, with a soul full of bitterness, "Do you still maintain your integrity? Curse God and die." This phrase echoes the despair of someone who has also lost everything, but who can no longer bear the suffering. Job, however, responds firmly and wisely, "You speak like a fool. Shall we receive good from God and not also evil?" This is one of the hardest statements to make, accepting both blessings and trials as part of a greater purpose. Here, Job gives us a lesson about patience that goes beyond physical endurance. He is at rock bottom, literally covered in pain, but maintains a high spiritual perspective. And look, he doesn't understand what's happening. He has no explanations. He has no relief. But still, he refuses to break with God. This is not passivity. It is active perseverance. It is a faith that does not depend on rewards, an integrity that does not bow to the pressure of pain. Many people believe that when their health goes away, everything ends. But Job shows otherwise. Even without strength, without dignity, he maintains what is most precious, his relationship with God. The ordeal here affects the body, but it also tests emotional, spiritual, and even marital limits. And yet, Job remains. Because those who have real faith don't depend on explanations. They depend on trust, and that trust, even wounded, still breathed within him. After days of intense pain, 3 of Job's friends appear: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They had heard of the misfortunes that had befallen him and decided to visit him. What happens when they see him from a distance is heartbreaking. They almost don't recognize him. Such was Job's condition that his own friends were shocked. And there, in front of a devastated man, they do something powerful. They sit with him on the floor and remain in complete silence for 7 days. This silence at first is rare wisdom. They don't try to explain anything, nor console with cliches. They are just there, present. Sometimes the greatest form of friendship is the simple act of being together, without having to say anything. They cry with him, tear his clothes, throw dust on his head, ancient gestures of deep empathy. It's as if they were saying, "We're here. We don't have answers, but we have presence." And at certain moments in life, that's worth 1,000 words. This episode teaches us something that many forget. There is wisdom in silence. When someone is in mourning, in crisis, in deep suffering, the most powerful thing is not to try to resolve it. It is to be there, to hear, respect other people's time. Job, at that moment, didn't need advice. He needed company. This kind of friendship is rare but deeply healing. It shows that even when everything falls apart, we can still find relief in true empathy. However, this silence does not last forever. And that's where the story takes on a new layer. Because when they start talking, everything changes. But for now, in this first moment, there is something sacred happening. 3 men, sitting next to a destroyed friend, offering their presence as a sign of love. This in itself is one of the greatest forms of wisdom. Knowing that in certain pains, the best way to speak is silence. After 7 days of silence, Job finally breaks the ice. But what comes out of his mouth is not a prayer of faith, nor a request for help. It's a bitter lament. He curses the day of his birth, not God, mind you, but the day he was born. "Why didn't I die at birth?" he asks in a cry of despair. This speech reveals a pain that has overflowed. Job doesn't want to live anymore, and not out of weakness but out of exhaustion. It was emptied inside. He no longer sees purpose or hope. And this moment is incredibly human. How many times have we thought like this? When suffering prolongs and God's silence seems deafening, even the strongest feel like giving up. Job allows us to see that even the righteous have their dark days. He doesn't pretend, he doesn't hide it. He laments with brutal sincerity. And this, instead of diminishing your faith, reveals how real it is, because authentic faith also bleeds. Here, Job teaches us a truth that few religious leaders admit. Doubting, lamenting, and crying are also part of the relationship with God. His despair is not rebellion, it is an outcry. He's saying, "I don't understand, but I'm still here." This kind of vulnerability is so valuable that it was recorded in the Bible as a portrait of faith in the midst of pain. It's not about being strong all the time. It's about continuing, even without strength. This lament marks the beginning of a new phase in history, the confrontation between pain and theology. Job is hurt, confused, but still in dialogue with God, even if it's just to complain. And that is profound, because faith, when it is true, continues to speak, even when everything seems lost. Job did not give up on God. He just wanted to understand. And this thirst for meaning would be the fuel for the intense dialogues that would follow. This is where the story takes on even more complex contours. After Job's lament, his friends break the silence, and what was comfort turns into debate. Eliphaz, the first to speak, tries to console with theology. affliction never comes from nothing. God is just. If you are suffering, it is because you did something. In other words, if Job suffers, it is because he deserves it. This idea, which seems logical, hides a trap. It ignores Job's innocence and distorts God's character as a mechanical, impersonal judge. Job responds, hurt but firm. He does not accept being accused without proof. Your suffering is already too great to bear unfair guilt as well. Bildad and Zophar continue in the same tone. They repeat traditional speeches about divine justice, trying to fit Job's pain into a rational model. But Job's suffering does not fit into these molds. And what was supposed to be support becomes a court. Job is not just hurt, he now has to defend his own integrity. These conversations are intense because they show something we all face: well-intentioned advice that hurts more than it helps. How many times do we hear phrases like, "This is God's plan," or "You need to have more faith," when all we want is someone to just listen to us? Job, already plunged into despair, now has to deal with accusations from friends who think they are helping. But who has never been hurt by words from people close to them who don't understand what we're going through? Still, these dialogues are valuable. They reveal the depth of the popular theology of the time, the conflict between doctrine and experience, between faith and reality. Job defends his innocence with strength. He knows something bigger is at stake. And although confused, he refuses to accept a shallow explanation for such a deep pain. The debate is just beginning, and with each new speech, the tension between divine justice and human suffering becomes more vivid. As the dialogues progress, the conversation deepens. Job is no longer just responding to his friends. He is questioning the very structure of traditional faith. "If I am innocent, why do I suffer?" he asks, revealing a dilemma that echoes to this day. He is not denying divine justice, but is trying to understand how it works in practice. In his speeches, the desire for a mediator emerges, someone who can intercede between him and God, because he feels that he is facing an unattainable judge. God's silence begins to weigh like a sentence. These questions are painful, but legitimate. Job recognizes the greatness of God, but he cannot accept that this greatness crushes him without explanation. He cries for a hearing, for justice, for meaning. Who can argue with God? He asks. Here we see the depth of Job's faith. He does not abandon God, but he demands answers. And this is revolutionary. This is not a man rebelling. It is a man begging for dialogue, for understanding, for justice with mercy. What makes this part so impactful is the identification it generates. All of us, at some point, have wanted to understand the reason for certain pains. We have already asked for explanations. And like Job, we often feel like we're talking to the wind. But even so, we continued praying. We keep searching. This shows that true faith does not need to be blind. She can and should ask questions. Job gives us permission to be human before God, fragile, confused, but still believing. These questions open space for a more mature, less automatic, more honest theology. Job doesn't want ready-made formulas. He wants to know the heart of God. His pain leads him to explore dimensions of faith that few dare to touch. He doesn't just want answers, he wants redemption. And in this afflicted search, a courageous, bold faith is revealed, which prefers to fight with God than to move away from him. It is in this tension that Job grows, and makes us grow too. After several attempts by his friends to give simplistic explanations about Job's suffering, he begins to rebel against this logic. He rejects easy solutions that try to frame pain as a direct punishment for some hidden sin. "I'm not here because I did something wrong," he cries, challenging traditional thinking that often reduces suffering to a question of deserving. He is tired of ready answers that don't make sense given the magnitude of his pain. Job's rebellion against easy explanations is a true revolution in his spiritual journey. He begins to realize that human wisdom, with its rigid formulas, cannot encompass the mystery of life and suffering. He teaches us that pain cannot always be fitted into simple boxes, and that true wisdom lies in recognizing the limits of human understanding. And most importantly, he shows us that we should not accept a superficial view of suffering, which sees only guilt where there may be complexity and mystery. Job also teaches us that sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in recognizing the fragility of human knowledge. He challenges his friends by pointing out that true wisdom does not come from repeated theological explanations, but from the ability to hear and understand the voice of God, which is not limited to our rigid structures of thought. He reaches a point where he no longer seeks just relief from his pain, but a deeper revelation about the divine nature and purpose of his life. This attitude of Job is a direct response to the superficiality of easy speeches. He refuses to accept an explanation that is not aligned with the complexity of his experience. Instead of settling for answers that don't make sense, he challenges human theology and seeks something deeper, something that can only be revealed by God. In doing so, Job teaches us a fundamental lesson. True faith is not satisfied with simple answers, but seeks the truth, however complex it may be. As Job's pain intensifies, he begins to feel something even more distressing: divine incomprehension. He questions God's silence more fervently, as if he is being crushed by an incomprehensible force. God's lack of response, the fact that he did not manifest himself in the midst of Job's suffering, causes an even more painful feeling of abandonment. Job even wonders why God chose him as the target of so much wrath, even for no apparent reason. This divine silence weighs like a condemnation. And what happens here is something profound. Job not only questions suffering, but begins to see the mystery of God as a burden. He feels small in the face of the vastness of suffering that he cannot understand. His condition as a fragile man, faced with the greatness of God, makes him feel crushed and incapable of understanding. Even with his unshakable faith, he cannot see meaning. He still believes in God, but what consumes him is the lack of an explanation. And this is a universal feeling. We have all at some point felt that our prayers seem to echo in the void. This anguish teaches us that faith is not just an easy response to suffering. It is also often a scream, a cry for justice, for explanation, for a sense that this all has a purpose. Job's pain, therefore, is not a simple lament. She is a sincere search for understanding. He is not rebelling against God, but trying to understand what seems completely incomprehensible. This inner struggle is what makes your journey even more human and at the same time greater. Job reveals, through this anguish, that true faith is not the absence of questions, but perseverance despite them. He finds himself crushed without answers, but still refuses to abandon his belief in a just God. This moment is a milestone in Job's journey because he is no longer just facing physical suffering or the pain of loss. He is challenging God's own silence, seeking an explanation that may never come. But what he doesn't know yet, and what we will soon discover, is that his trust in God, even in misunderstanding, is about to be rewarded in ways he never imagined. The story of Job is without a doubt one of the most disconcerting and transformative narratives in the entire Bible. She does not offer us easy answers, but invites us on an internal journey. As we walk through each chapter of our pain, we realize that suffering does not choose a time. It does not make distinctions, and often it arrives without warning, without explanation. But we also learn that even in the face of chaos, it is possible to maintain faith, integrity, and hope. Job shows us that God is not just interested in what we have, but in who we are when everything is taken from us. He teaches us that true faith is not measured in blessings, but in perseverance during losses. That humility in the face of mystery is wiser than any arrogant theology. And that, no matter how dark the valley is, God's presence can be felt even in the silence. This story touches on a point we all avoid, the idea that the righteous also suffer. Job was innocent, God-fearing, upright. Even so, he faced the worst pain a human being can endure. This reminds us that pain is not a sign of abandonment, but can be a bridge to a deeper encounter with the Creator. He wasn't left aside, he was chosen for something greater. And at the end of it all, Job was not only restored materially, he was elevated spiritually. He knew God in a way he never would have known without pain. And you, facing a season of loss, silence, or trials, have you ever wondered if God is still there? Know that Job also asked. He shouted, he cried, but he stayed. He did not abandon God, and God, at the right time, did not abandon him either. Perhaps you are now living the most difficult chapter in your history. Maybe you're tired of waiting for answers. But Job's life assures us that the reward is not just in the end of the pain, but in who we become in the process. Real gold is refined in fire, and your faith, like his, may emerge from this test more precious than ever. So don't give up. Don't give up your faith in times of trouble. Persevere. Question, yes, but keep walking. Because God does not forget those who remain faithful even in the darkest valley. And if Job, even though he was broken, was restored, you can be too. If this message spoke to you, if it touched your soul, then subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and share this content with someone who needs to hear this word today. This story isn't just about what happened to Job, it's about what can happen to you.